Recently, I received a very interesting shaileh. Pot of a frying pan. Somebody put a piece of bread, I guess, to toast in this pot of a frying pan. The piece of bread got hot. Somebody took a piece of cheese, a slice of cheese, put it on this piece of bread that's sitting in this pot of a frying pan. After a few moments, realized, oy vey, it's a pot of a frying pan. Possibly the frying pan became milchik and took it off. So, Lepoil, they assumed that it's still pativ. And then, a few days later, they decided, you know what? Let's make this pot of a frying pan fleshik. And they went ahead and now used the frying pan for fleshik. And someone reminded the person, you know, a few days ago, a few weeks ago, actually someone had a piece of bread and put a slice of cheese on the bread while it was in this frying pan. So now, how could you make it fleshik when it's possibly milchik? That was the shaileh. So let's start from the back end. No matter what, even if the frying pan became milchik, any fleshik that you cooked in the frying pan is going to be mutter b'diavad because it was an eina b'yomai. It would happen a few days or a few weeks later. So since it's an eina b'yomai, b'diavad, the food is kosher. The frying pan would now need to be kosher if it indeed became milchik. And now you use the frying pan for fleshik. The halacha is, although the food is mutter b'diavad, but you have to kosher the frying pan. Just to make a note, if it's covered or coated in Teflon, that's a non-koshering material. According to many poskim, you cannot kosher it. So therefore, you have to throw it out, I guess, and buy a new one. But let's go back to the ikir shaileh. Did it really become milchik? So let's start off. Did the piece of bread become hot or not? Let's assume the piece of bread did not become hot. So according to many poskim, although we say tata or gavar, and although we say that the thing that's on bottom is going to affect and make the one on top also hot, ubefrat when it's al ha'esh, everybody holds that the eish is gavar, even those that say yilo gavar or tata gavar, no matter what, even if the bottom one was cold, if it's al ha'esh, for sure that one is gavar. However, the Chavos Das says the mitzias is that if the top one or the bottom one, whichever case it is, did not change bepoyel mamish, it doesn't make the top one have a different halacha. So if the piece of bread would actually still be cold, so concerning the bread with the frying pan, let's say the frying pan was fleshik or milchik, the bread might become fleshik. But if the bread stayed cold, then whatever you put on the bread, including the cheese, if the cheese didn't melt or get any hot, would never be a shaileh. Just take out the bread and throw it out because it never made the bread hot. It's difficult that the bread shouldn't become hot, lemaisa, because it becomes hot once it's in the frying pan. And the shaileh was lepoil that the bread became hot. But I was just pointing that out. According to many poskim, tata gavar doesn't actually change the status, the mitzias. You're not going to burn your finger on a tata gavar if the bottom one is hot and the top one is cold. You're not going to burn your finger if you touch the top one. That was a joke. But if the bread actually became hot, now what's the din? So this is a huge shaileh in machlokes poskim. When you take this piece of cheese and put it on the bread, even if the cheese started already, let's say to melt a little bit, and it didn't, let's say mamish drip in, but even if it did, so then the shaileh becomes, the time of the cheese that's in the bread is a bolua. Does a bolua go out below roitiv? Now, this was bread. There was no roitiv. They weren't making French toast. This was trying to toast a piece of bread, as far as I understood the shaileh. So the shaileh is, do we say that what's in the bread is only a bliya, and ein Issur bolua because the halacha is that a bliya in anything will not come out unless there's roitiv. So that's exactly the case. I have a piece of bread. Let's assume there's a bliya now of cheese in the bread. It's touching a pot of a frying pan, below roitiv. Do we say that it doesn't come out? So here, there's actually a big machlokes achronim. Normally, we say that when does a balua not come out below roitiv? When it's not shomein, when it's not fatty, when it's only kochush lean. But if it's fatty, it will come out. I were never baki bin kochush l'shomein. One of the cases that we're baki is a bliya. Ve'en kan mekoyle. By a balua, we're baki bin kochush l'shomein. So here comes the interesting shaileh. The cheese itself is not a bliya. That's an Issur machmas atzmoi, or a machmas atzmoi. It's not awesome. So on the cheese, we're not baki. But the minute the time of the cheese goes into the bread, it becomes a bolua. Are we then suddenly baki on the same time, at the same moment of the bliya in the bread, and now it's kochush and it's not going to come out and aser the frying pan or make the frying pan milk? So it's a pashto machlokes achronim between the Pri Megadim against the Chavos Das. The Pri Megadim says, yeah, we're actually baki. Even though on the cheese, at this moment, we're not baki, but the minute the time of this cheese, the hispashtus of this cheese goes into the bread, we're suddenly going to be baki. And if you know that the cheese is considered lean, then it's not going to oiser. Mashiach, according to the Chavos Das clearly says that the only time you could say you're baki on a bliya is only if you're not paskening at the same time on the original piece of cheese. You can't talk out of two sides of your mouth. You can't look at the cheese and say, shomein, and at the same moment look at its ispashtus, at its blia, and say kosher. So according to the Chavez Das, once you're not boki on the cheese, you're also not boki on the blia, and it will go into the frying pan. So it's a clear machloikis. According to the Pri Megadim, there's a possibility to be matter the frying pan, to keep it parev, because we're boki on the cheese, and the cheese might be kochush. And according to the Chavez Das, no matter what, the frying pan is milky. So even according to the Pri Megadim, we also have to know if the cheese was kochush or shomein. I would say you have to talk to someone in the industry, because it's possible to know today what type of cheese it was and if there's any fattiness to the cheese. However, I would imagine that if you take any cheese and you melt it, you always see some shumen and you always see some schmaltz, some fattiness melting out of the cheese. So I think it's comfortable to say that even according to the Pri Megadim, you would have to l'poil mamish actually consider the cheese shomein, not only because we're not boki, because we're boki. It's probably take shomein. So therefore, according to the Chavez Das, zicher, the frying pan becomes milchik because we're not boki ben kochach l'shomen on the cheese. So we have to assume that it goes straight through the bread into the frying pan. And even according to the Pri Megadim, that there's a svara, yeshmokim lahokel, the pashtus, the cheeses that we see today have a takya din of shomein, and it will takya aser beloy. And therefore the frying pan takya became milchik, and therefore you have to cash in the frying pan once they use it for fleshik.